The day my little brother Leo was born, my mom dug a claw hammer out of the toolbox. It was because she'd felt a small bump of cartilage on his ear, what the old-timers called a rebel's bone. "If we don't hammer this rebel bone flat, he'll grow up to be a menace," she said. "An ungrateful snake we can't control. This one hammer blow will change his fate. It's the only way he'll listen to us, make something of himself and not break our hearts." I threw all my strength into stopping her, and I saved his ear. But years later he got into drinking, gambling, and women and racked up huge debts with loan sharks. To pay them off for him, I emptied my savings and took on a mountain of debt myself. I thought my sacrifice would make him turn over a new leaf. Instead, all I got was more entitlement and resentment. When I refused to pay off a new gambling debt, my mom pointed a finger in my face and screamed, "This is all your fault. If you hadn't stopped me back then, I would have hammered the devil out of him. He wouldn't be like this today. You just can't stand to see your brother succeed. You're a jinx on this family." My brother's eyes were full of hate as he threw the loan sharks collection notice in my face. "I'm like this because of you. You ruined me. You owe me your life." He charged into my room with a fruit knife and stabbed me to death. When I opened my eyes again, my mom was holding that same claw hammer high, aiming it at the baby in the swaddling clothes. The baby's piercing cries slowly pulled me back to reality. Before me, my mother, Laura, had a fanatical look on her face. The claw hammer, meant for pounding nails, was raised high, aimed at her own 3-day-old son. The cold metal reflected her twisted expression. "Paige! For God's sake, Paige! Are you just going to stand there? Stop your mother." My father, Jim, was sweating bullets, too scared to step in himself. He just kept shoving my arm, his voice a panicked whisper. "You're the educated one. You've been to school. Tell her she's going to kill him. Do it. Just like before. Exactly like my past life." He always hid behind me, pushing me forward to be his shield. In my last life, I listened to him. I cried and begged, clinging to my mom's leg, pleading with her not to do it. The result was that my mom blamed me for everything, and I was forced to carry the weight of my brother's tragic life. This time, I had no intention of being the foolish hero. Under my dad's anxious gaze, not only did I not step forward, but I took a calm step to the side, clearing the space between him and my mother. Then, I turned to my mother's savage face and offered a faint, understanding smile. "Dad, don't worry. Mom is Leo's mother. Would she ever really hurt him? I'm sure she just wants what's best for him. I trust Mom." My dad stared at me in disbelief. But my mom, hearing my words, lost the last trace of hesitation in her eyes. It was replaced by the ecstasy of finding a kindred spirit. "See? I knew my daughter was the sensible one." She shot a triumphant look at my dad. "Jim, what does an ignorant man like you know? I'm doing this for his own good. The old saying goes, a rebel's bone in the ear, a born traitor to fear. You can't tame a kid like that. They have no love for their parents. They'd turn on you with a knife for some outsider. With this one blow today, I'm severing the root of his misfortune and crushing his wild nature. Only then will he be obedient, be one of us, have a bright future, and earn big money to take care of us in our old age." My dad's face went pale. Seeing he couldn't persuade my mom, he started shooting me desperate looks, whispering urgently, "Paige, listen to her. She's lost her mind. Say something. Just tell her to wait a couple of days, to ask an expert. Quick. Stall for time." I got his signal. Pretending to be torn, I stepped forward and tugged on my mom's sleeve, my voice placating. "Mom, Dad's just worried about Leo. How about we just hammer one side for now. If it works out, we can do the other side in a couple of days." Before I could finish, my mom violently shook my hand off and barked, "See how it goes? In 2 days, the ship will have sailed. Changing fate has to be done in one go. You can't be wishy-washy or do things halfway and expect to succeed. You have to pull out the root of the problem all at once." She seemed utterly enraged by our hesitation. She shoved me aside. "Both of you, get out of my way. Don't ruin my son's future." With that, she didn't hesitate for another second. She swung her arm in a wide arc, and the claw hammer whistled through the air, crashing down hard on the infant's left ear. Thud. A dull, sickening sound. The baby's cries instantly shot up in pitch. My dad screamed and collapsed onto the floor in a heap. But it wasn't over. My mom, deciding one blow wasn't enough, raised the hammer again. Good things come in pairs. If you're gonna do it right. Another heavy impact. The baby's face was already turning purple from crying. My mom, steeling herself, brought the hammer down on his right ear. This time, the baby's shrill scream stopped abruptly. The world seemed to fall silent. All that was left was the faint twitching of his limbs, and the blood welling up from behind his ears. I watched calmly, my heart not stirring in the slightest. You're insane, you psycho. You killed your own son. My dad finally snapped out of it, scrambling to his feet to grab the baby. But my mom was faster. Her face showed no fear, only the satisfaction of a great task completed. She blocked my dad, glanced at the mangled, bloody wounds behind the baby's ears, and said dismissively, "What are you making a fuss about? A baby's bones are soft. He's not going to die." With that, she rushed over to the stove, grabbed a handful of black ash from the incense burner, and pressed it directly onto my brother's wounds. Blood mixed with ash, forming a disgusting dark red paste. As she pressed, she muttered, "Don't panic. Incense ash stops bleeding, and it asks the gods for their blessing. It's better than any medicine from the hospital." My dad, sitting slumped on the floor, his lips trembling, couldn't say a word. He watched, horrified, as my mom smeared that filthy, dark red paste over their son's mangled ears. The bleeding stopped for the moment, but the baby's face, from a high fever and lack of oxygen, had turned a strange bluish purple. He was like a fish thrown onto the shore, doing nothing but twitching weakly. My mom was panting heavily, her forehead slick with sweat, but her eyes shone with the light of a mission accomplished. My dad's desperate gaze fell on me. I was his last hope, his educated daughter who could speak some sense. I received his signal. I slowly walked over to my mom. Under her wary gaze, I picked up an enamel mug from the table, filled it with water, and offered it to her with both hands. "Mom, you must be exhausted." My voice was soft, filled with just the right amount of concern and admiration. "Here, have some water and rest. With you personally changing his fate, Leo is sure to have a blessed life." Hearing this, the last glimmer of hope in my dad's eyes died, replaced by utter desolation. He understood. His only ally had just defected to the enemy. My mom paused, then raised an eyebrow, her eyes full of surprise. She took the mug, gulped down half of it, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and looked smugly at her husband collapsed on the floor. "Did you hear that? Even Paige is more sensible than you. You're a grown man, and you're completely useless. All you can do is sit there and whine." After scolding him, she lovingly stroked my head. "My Paige is the best. You know how much your mom worries about you and your brother." I lowered my head obediently, hiding the ice in my eyes. For the next few hours, my mom was completely absorbed in the joy of her successful fate-changing, and ignored my dad's pleas to go to the hospital. It wasn't until nightfall that my brother's condition took a sharp turn for the worse. He developed a persistent high fever, his whole body burning up like a furnace. The faint twitching turned into frequent convulsions. His limbs went rigid, and he began to foam at the mouth. "This is bad. He's having seizures. Laura, we have to go to the hospital. We have to." My dad was finally in a full-blown panic. My mom was startled, but she quickly composed herself. She rushed forward and held down my brother's convulsing body, her eyes gleaming with an even more fervent light. "What the hell do you know?" She screamed at my dad. "Those aren't seizures. A spirit's entered him. It's rebuilding his body from the inside out. It's a blessing. If you dare move him now, you'll be interrupting a god's work. It'll bring a curse down on us." As she yelled, she grabbed the thickest quilt and threw it over my brother, covering him completely. "He just needs to sweat it out. When the gods are at work, a good sweat will force out all the bad stuff." Under the blanket, my brother's convulsions grew weaker. My dad completely broke down. He fell to his knees, slapping his own face and sobbing hysterically. My mom stood guard by the quilt, her hands clasped, muttering prayers and waiting for a miracle. Under the heavy quilt, my brother's convulsions gradually stopped. My dad scrambled over and ripped the quilt off. The baby underneath had his eyes shut tight, his lips purple, and his small face was the color of an eggplant. His chest wasn't moving at all. He wasn't breathing. Aya! My dad let out a piercing scream. He whipped his head around, his bloodshot eyes locking onto my mom, who was still muttering her prayers. You evil bitch. I'll kill you, he roared, charging at my mom for the first time, shoving her with all his might. Caught off guard, my mom stumbled backward and hit the corner of the table, letting out a sharp cry of pain. My dad ignored her. With trembling hands, he picked up that tiny, feverish, lifeless body and ran like a madman for the door. Paige! Quick! Save your brother! He yelled to me in desperation. Without hesitating, I grabbed my jacket from the back of a chair and calmly followed him. There were no taxis on the village road late at night. My dad ran for his life, clutching the baby. I followed behind, using my phone to call a car and telling the driver to wait at the village entrance. The whole way, my mom's curses followed us from a distance. Jim, you son of a bitch. How dare you take my son? I curse you to get hit by a car and die. I curse you to spend the rest of your life begging on the streets. You give me back my son's good fortune. Her voice was vicious and full of hate. My dad shivered but didn't stop. He ran straight to the waiting taxi and jumped in with Leo. At the city hospital's emergency room, the doctor on duty took one look at my brother, and his face changed instantly. Quick! Get him to resuscitation. Prepare for intubation. Get him on a ventilator. As he barked out orders, he turned on my dad angrily. What happened to the wound on his head? And what is this black stuff? What kind of parents are you? My dad was terrified, stammering, unable to form a single word. I calmly stepped forward and answered for him. Doctor, his mother hit him with a hammer, and then put incense ash on the wounds. Every doctor and nurse in the ER stopped what they were doing and stared at us like we were monsters. The attending physician's face turned livid. He pointed a finger at my dad's nose and yelled, "That's insane. This is aggravated assault. You just wait, I'm calling the police." Don't call the police. My dad's legs gave out, and he almost fell to his knees, his voice cracking as he begged. After a series of frantic tests and emergency procedures, they managed to get my brother's weak heartbeat and breathing back. He was rushed to the neonatal intensive care unit. The attending physician slapped a critical condition notice down in front of my dad. The patient has a skull fracture, and the wound became severely infected. The bacteria have entered his brain. It's acute purulent meningitis. The child is in mortal danger. Even if we save him, it's highly likely he'll have permanent brain damage. He could have intellectual disabilities, be paralyzed on one side, or become deaf or blind. You need to prepare yourselves. My dad swayed as he looked at the diagnosis on the form. The doctor ignored him and handed him another sheet. Here's the estimated cost. Go pay a $50,000 deposit. The final bill will only be higher. $50,000. That number was the final straw that broke my dad. He didn't take the paper. He just staggered to the end of the hallway, pulled out his phone, and dialed my mom. The second she picked up, all his accumulated fear, anger, and despair erupted in a hysterical roar. Laura, you lunatic. You've killed him. The doctor is threatening to call the police on you. Our son is dying. And even if he doesn't, he'll be disabled. It's going to cost hundreds of thousands. You've destroyed this family. Are you satisfied now? He screamed until his voice was raw, then slumped against the wall and slid to the floor. A nurse stood nearby, urging, "Sir, please go pay the deposit. We need to start the medication." My dad didn't hear her. He just stared into space with empty eyes, gasping for air. I walked past him calmly, took the payment slip from the nurse and asked softly, "Excuse me, where is the billing office?" Just then, my dad's eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed backward. Doctor! Doctor! Someone fainted over here." The nurse's shout echoed through the empty hallway. The world descended into chaos. And I just stood there silently, in the eye of the storm, clutching the slip of paper that held my brother's life and my family's future in the balance. My dad was rushed onto a gurney by the doctors and nurses. He had only fainted from the shock and stress. There was nothing seriously wrong with him. After watching him being wheeled into an observation room, I took out my phone and called home. It rang for a long time before my mom finally answered. Her voice was impatient. Jim, you have the nerve to call me? You've ruined my son. I'm telling you this isn't over. I explained. Mom, Dad fainted. Leo is in the NICU. The doctor said we need to pay a $50,000 deposit right away. Bring all the money we have and come to the city hospital. I hung up before she could reply. About an hour later, my mom arrived looking frazzled. The moment she saw me, she launched into an interrogation. Where's that useless bum of a father of yours? How much is it? Let me tell you, Paige, if you and the doctors are trying to scam me, I'll skin you alive. I answered calmly, we haven't paid yet. Before he passed out, Dad said I should wait for you to make the decision. She raised her eyebrows, staring at me suspiciously. Don't play games with me. What kind of decision could that good-for-nothing make? It's you. You're jealous of your brother. You can't stand the thought of him being successful and taking care of me in my old age. So you convinced your dad to bring him to the hospital to drain me of my life savings and laugh at our misfortune. I told you my way would have worked. You're the jinx who had to come and ruin everything. I didn't argue. I just handed her the critical condition notice, still creased from my dad's grip, that I had just gotten back from the doctor. She snatched it away. Her cloudy eyes stared at the words critical condition, and for a split second, her arrogance faltered. But a moment later, she sneered as if she'd uncovered a massive conspiracy. Critical condition? Don't try to scare me with this crap. All hospitals pull this stunt. The sicker they say you are, the more money they can squeeze out of you. What stupid meningitis? It's just a regular fever. They're just trying to trick us out of $50,000. As she spoke, she contemptuously ripped the paper that held her son's life in the balance into tiny pieces. We're not paying. We're going home. I told you my method would work, but none of you would listen. Where's your brother? Get him, we're going home. She grabbed my arm and tried to drag me out of the hospital. Other patients' families and nurses started staring, pointing and whispering about us. I let her drag me, stumbling, toward the payment window. Just as she was about to tell the clerk, "We're not getting treatment," I stopped dead in my tracks. She yanked hard, but I didn't budge. She turned and glared at me. "What are you trying to pull now?" Slap. A sharp slap landed across my face, stinging hot. "I'm warning you, Paige, if you pay a single cent today, I'll kill you," she threatened. I didn't cry or cover my face. There, in the crowded hospital lobby, under the sympathetic gaze of strangers, I spoke, enunciating every word. "Mom, I'm not leaving." Then, from my old cloth book bag, I slowly pulled out two things. The first was my bank book. It held all the scholarship money and allowance I had saved since middle school, a total of $13,000. The second was the university acceptance letter, with its shining gold print, that had just arrived at our house. In front of everyone, I pushed both items toward my mother. "Mom, don't be angry and don't worry about the money." My voice wasn't loud, but it was filled with a choked-up finality that moved everyone who heard it. "I'm not going to college. I'll go find a job in a factory tomorrow. I'm young, I'm strong. I can earn the money for my brother's medical bills. He's my only brother. I can't just stand by and watch him die." Before I could finish, a wave of gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. "My God, that girl is so brave. How can a mother be like that when she has such a good daughter? She's giving up college to save her brother. What a wonderful sister." Their words were like invisible needles, piercing my mother's skin. Her face, once so arrogant, flushed red and then turned pale. She was being burned at the stake of public opinion. She stared greedily at the bank book, then warily at me, trapped. I saw right through her. I took out the pen and paper I had prepared and quickly wrote a few lines, then handed it to her. "Mom, I know you're just worried about me, afraid I'll ruin my life. How about this? You sign this statement. It says that I, Paige, am voluntarily giving up my education and using all my savings to pay for my brother's medical treatment." I looked up at her, my voice naive and considerate. "If you sign this, then later when relatives ask, You can just say that I insisted on saving him, that you couldn't stop me. That way no one can blame you." My mother's face shifted under the pale, fluorescent lights of the hospital lobby. The murmuring around us grew louder. She was breathing heavily, her eyes glued to the pen and paper in my hands. "In the end, greed and vanity won." "Umph. You're the one who said it." She snatched the pen from my hand and scrawled her name crookedly on the thin piece of paper. "Laura." After signing, she grabbed my bank book and acceptance letter, as if afraid I'd change my mind. "I'll hold on to these for you, so you don't go spending money recklessly." With that, she marched straight to the payment window and slammed the bank book on the counter. "Here's $13,000. Put it toward the bill." It didn't even occur to her to wonder if that was enough. I didn't care. I just carefully folded the signed statement, then folded it again, and tucked it into the pocket closest to my heart. It was my bill of sale, and also my ticket to freedom. With that money, my brother Leo's treatment began. A few days later, he was transferred out of the NICU and into a regular ward. My dad was discharged, too. He looked 10 years older and spent his days in silence. The family sat around the hospital bed in a dead funereal silence, until the attending physician walked in with the final test results. "We saved the boy's life, but the long-term side effects we warned you about have appeared." He paused, then continued. "The bacterial infection severely damaged his auditory nerve. His right ear is now completely deaf." My mother swayed. "Furthermore, the facial nerves have also suffered irreversible damage. Look." The doctor pointed to my brother's face. "The left corner of his mouth is slightly drooping, and his left eye doesn't fully close. These are symptoms of facial paralysis, and they will become more pronounced over time. To put it bluntly, your son's face is crooked." Deaf. A crooked face. Those words hit my parents like a sledgehammer. My mom threw herself at the bed, frantically turning Leo's head from side to side. On the infant's face, the left corner of his mouth was indeed lower than the right, creating a strange, twisted arc. She then leaned close to his right ear, clapping and shouting. But the baby didn't react, sleeping soundly through it all. It was over. The son she had dreamed of, the one who would bring honor to the family and let her live a life of leisure, had become a disfigured, defective product. "How could this happen? How could this happen?" she muttered, slumping to the floor in a daze. "I spent all that money, and this is what I get back." Her tone held not a shred of pity for her son, only immense resentment and bitterness. My dad squatted in a corner, his hands buried in his hair, on the verge of a breakdown. Watching the expressions on their faces, I knew the time was right. I quietly packed my little cloth bag, walked over to them, and said in a matter-of-fact tone, "Dad, Mom, Leo's follow-up treatments will cost a lot more money. I'm going to head south today to find a factory job. I'll send money home every month." Lost in their own grief, they just waved a hand dismissively, as if shooing away a fly. "Go on, go." I turned and walked out of that suffocating hospital room, out of the hospital, without a single backward glance. The sunlight outside was a bit blinding. I didn't go to the long-distance bus station. I walked straight to the train station. Half an hour later, I was sitting on a train headed for the state capital, the city landscape rushing past my window. I carefully pulled 2 items from my innermost pocket. One was the university acceptance letter I had thrown in the trash, and then secretly retrieved. The other was the statement, my ticket to freedom, signed with Laura's name. I leaned back against the seat, looked out at the vast world outside, and let out a long, slow breath. The Paige who was born to hope for a son was, from this day forward, reborn. A month later, my brother Leo was discharged from the hospital. My parents had spent all their savings and borrowed money from every relative they knew just to snatch him back from the brink of death. But their home was no longer the same. The golden child, who was once the vessel for all their hopes and dreams, was now a sickly boy who needed constant care. The crookedness of his face became more obvious. He struggled to drink milk, often choking until his face turned red. Because he was deaf in his right ear, he lived mostly in his own world, unresponsive to the sounds around him. He only cried, a sharp, monotonous wail, when he was uncomfortable, day and night, grating on everyone's nerves. Hope had turned to disappointment. Expectation had become a burden. The atmosphere in the house soured from grim silence to a constant state of war. The first battle erupted when the baby formula ran out. "There's no money," my mom screamed, slamming the empty can on the table. "Jim, you're so capable, right? Go on, conjure up some formula for your son." My dad, squatting in the corner, took a drag from his cigarette. "What am I supposed to do? Who was the one who hammered him into this mess in the first place?" "Ha, you have the nerve to bring that up," my mom exploded. "If you hadn't insisted on going to the hospital and wasting all that money, would we be in this situation? If you'd just listened to me and let him sweat it out at home, he probably would have been fine." "That's bullshit," my dad yelled, throwing his cigarette to the ground. "Listen to you? If I'd listened to you, we'd be visiting his grave by now. You brainless, evil woman. You ruined our son. You ruined this family." "I ruined the family? Jim, you useless coward. If it wasn't for that little bitch Paige, I would have gotten it right with the first hammer blow. It was you two, scheming together to hurt my son. Once the war started, it never stopped. They fought about medical bills, about the babies crying, about what to eat for dinner. Everything breakable in the house was broken. The neighbors looked at us with a mixture of contempt and pity. Meanwhile, I was miles away in a college town, enjoying a peace I had never known in 2 lifetimes. But my parents, hundreds of miles away, had no intention of letting me have it. During my first week of classes, my mom's call came. The moment I answered, there was no greeting, just a blunt command. "Paige, didn't you go to find work? Where's this month's money? Send it home now. Your brother needs his medicine." I was sitting in the bright, clean library, sunlight falling on the pages of my book. I calmly turned a page and said flatly, "Mom, have you forgotten? You signed a statement at the hospital. It clearly says our financial ties are severed. I used all my money for the deposit. My obligation is fulfilled." There was a full 3 seconds of silence on the other end, followed by an earth-shattering torrent of curses. "You little bastard. You tricked me. I raised you for all those years for nothing. I hope you rot in hell." I didn't wait for her to finish. I hung up and blocked her number. Starting the second month, I began sending a letter home on time, every single month. Each time, they would see the familiar handwriting on the envelope and feel a brief flicker of hope, thinking I'd had a change of heart and sent money. But when they tore open the envelope, there was always just a small, clean slip of paper inside. On it, in neat script, was the same sentence. "Mom and Dad, I'm doing fine out here. Don't worry about me." Hope, ignited and extinguished again and again. This mental torture was far worse for them than poverty. 2 years passed in this endless cycle of fighting and resentment. Leo was a toddler now, able to walk. He was smaller and thinner than other kids his age. His crooked face gave him a perpetually sad expression that wasn't endearing. One day, he was crying all day because he didn't feel well. My mom, frayed by the noise and unable to get her chores done, finally snapped. All her years of pent-up resentment exploded. She stormed over, shoved Leo to the ground, and pointed at him, screaming the most vicious words imaginable. "Cry, cry, cry. That's all you do. You little debt collector. I must have been blind. Why didn't I just kill you with that hammer when I had the chance?" The little boy was so scared he stopped crying, his whole body trembling. He sat on the cold floor, his eyes wide with terror and confusion, staring at the monstrous woman before him. He couldn't hear what she was saying, but he could understand the undisguised, bone-deep disgust and hatred in her face. 10 years flew by. In those 10 years, I put myself through college with student loans and part-time jobs. After graduation, I stayed in the bustling city, found a good job, and got my own small, cozy apartment. I completely erased my past, living like an orphan and building a brand new life for myself. Meanwhile, my old home, carefully cultivated by my absence, had become a prison of resentment. Leo grew up in that prison, turning 10 years old. The atrophied muscles in his cheek made his features distorted. "Wry Mouth" was the nickname he'd had since his first day of kindergarten. Because of his deaf right ear, he couldn't hear the teacher in class. His grades were terrible, and he was a headache for every teacher he had. Because of poverty, he always wore ill-fitting, second-hand clothes that carried a faint, musty smell. At school, He was a target for every bully. At home, he was the trash can for his parents' frustrations and failed lives. You waste of space. Why don't you just die? If it weren't for you, would our family be in this mess? What did I do in a past life to deserve a debt collector like you for a son? Those were the words he heard most in his first 10 years of life. He grew like a weed in a sewer, twisted and venomous, covered in the thorns of self-loathing and resentment. But he didn't hate the parents who had done this to him, because my mom and dad had long ago found him the perfect scapegoat, a target for all his malice. Son, don't blame us. If you're going to blame anyone, blame your rotten, black-hearted sister. One night, after Leo had come home with a black eye and a split lip from another fight, my mom held him and, in an uncharacteristically gentle voice, began to tell him the story she had twisted 1,000 times over. I was trying to give you a good fate, but your sister, she was jealous. She stood there and secretly chanted a curse, which made my hand slip. My dad chimed in, adding fuel to the fire. That's right. When your sister saw you were hurt, she couldn't have been happier. She pretended to offer her tuition money and tricked us into signing that paper. Then she took all our money and ran. That was the money to save your life. She wanted you to turn out just like this. She just can't stand to see you do well. She can't stand to see our family happy. A lie told 1,000 times becomes the only truth. Leo grew to despise the sister he had never met, the one who had ruined his life. He would often lie awake at night, carving my name into the wall with a small knife, imagining cutting me into 1,000 pieces. Finally, at 16, he was expelled from school for smashing a classmate's head with a rock. My parents brought him home, beating and cursing him the whole way. Back at the house, my mom pointed at his nose and started in on her familiar refrain. You useless bum. Just like that bitch of a sister of yours, you're both here to make us miserable. Don't you talk about me. Leo suddenly lunged like a cornered animal, his eyes red as he roared at my mom. I'm not useless. It's all Paige's fault. She's the one who ruined me. He had finally made his parents' decade of brainwashing his own steadfast belief. Give me her address. I'm going to find her. I'm going to kill her, he screamed hysterically. My parents looked at his twisted face, not with fear, but with a shared, triumphant glance. They had been waiting for this day for a very long time. That night, I had just finished a long meeting at work and was dragging my exhausted body home. My phone chimed. It was a text from an unknown number. I assumed it was spam and opened it. The screen showed only a few short words. Paige, why aren't you dead yet? I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't reply. I wasn't afraid. The attack dog my family had fed on a diet of pure hatred for 16 years was finally being let off its leash. I calmly deleted the message and then did 3 things. First, I sent an email to my direct supervisor, briefly explaining that due to a complex family history, I might be subject to harassment in the near future, and wanted the company to be prepared. Second, I placed the original signed statement and a copy of the hospital diagnosis into a safe deposit box at the bank, keeping only a notarized copy on my person. Third, I ordered a small, high-decibel personal alarm online. After all that, I ate dinner and went to sleep, just like any other night. 3 days later, he came. That afternoon, I was preparing materials for a meeting when the receptionist called my extension, her voice shaky. Paige, there are some people downstairs in the lobby. They say they're your family, and they're making a scene. Security can't get them to leave. I know. I'm on my way down. I hung up the phone calmly. When I got to the first-floor lobby, a crowd of my co-workers had already gathered to watch. In the center of the crowd stood the family I hadn't seen in 16 years. My mom had her hands on her hips, screaming at the front desk staff. My dad stood to the side, sighing dramatically, playing his favorite role of the long-suffering victim. And behind them stood a gaunt, sullen-eyed teenager. He wore a cheap, ill-fitting tracksuit, his hair was a mess, and the left corner of his mouth drooped in a permanent sneer, making his whole face look aggressive. That was Leo. I walked through the crowd and stopped in front of them. Paige, you heartless bitch. You finally show your face. My mom saw me and immediately turned all her fire on me. Your brother borrowed $50,000 to come find you. Now the debt collectors are after him. You have to pay this money back for him. My dad quickly chimed in, his voice heavy with sorrow. Paige, your brother has had it so rough all these years. It's all because of what you did. You have to take responsibility. Take him in, find him a job. You have to support him from now on. One wanted money, the other wanted me to take on a lifelong burden. Their act was perfectly coordinated. My co-workers started whispering. Their eyes on me now filled with a mix of curiosity and judgment. I ignored them and looked at my parents, asking calmly, "Are you finished?" Before they could answer, I pulled a plastic sleeved sheet of A4 paper from my briefcase, the notarized copy of the statement. Laura, Jim, 16 years ago, you personally signed this document. I held up the document for them, and for everyone else to see. It's here in black and white, and it's legally binding. It states that our financial ties are severed. We owe each other nothing. Therefore, I will not be giving you a single cent. My mom's face turned the color of a beet. She lunged forward to grab it, but a security guard stopped her. I turned to my dad. A flicker of panic crossed his face. I took out my phone, selected an audio file, and turned the volume all the way up. And Dad, you seem to have forgotten why my brother is the way he is today. That's okay. I have a reminder for you. The next second, my dad's hysterical roar from 16 years ago echoed through the gleaming corporate lobby. Laura, you lunatic. You've killed him. The doctor is threatening to call the police on you. You've destroyed this family. Are you satisfied now? The voice in the recording was filled with terror and rage. My dad's face went white as a sheet. My mom, after a moment of shock, immediately counterattacked, pointing at my dad and screaming, "You're lying. You were just shouting nonsense to shift the blame. When did I ever say I wouldn't save my son? Is that so?" I looked at her calmly, tapped my phone screen, and played the second recording. It was her own shrill, cruel voice from the hospital hallway 16 years ago, reacting to the critical condition notice. Critical condition? Don't try to scare me with this crap. All hospitals pull this stunt. The sicker they say you are, the more money they can squeeze out of you. What stupid meningitis? It's just a regular fever. They're just trying to trick us out of $50,000. The moment that recording played, a gasp went through the crowd. Everyone was staring at my mother like she was a monster. Her face flushed a deep purple, her lips trembling as she tried to argue. I was just angry. I didn't say I wouldn't get him treated. You didn't. A cold smile touched my lips as I played the final recording. We're not paying. We're going home. My method would have worked if you'd just listened. Where is he? Get him, we're going home. One after another, the 3 recordings played like 3 hard slaps to the face, completely shredding my parents' pitiful victim facade. The lobby fell dead silent. My dad slumped against the wall like a spineless dog. My mom stood frozen under the contemptuous stares of the crowd, her face turning from red to purple to a sickly green. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Their unbreakable alliance of victimhood had just been shattered by the sound of their own voices. Security. I put my phone away and addressed the 2 guards who were standing by. These 3 individuals are my family, but their behavior is now severely disrupting my work. Please escort them out. The guards immediately moved in, grabbing my stunned parents by the arms. They were half pushed, half dragged out of the building, still screaming curses. And Leo, the avenger sent as a weapon, stood frozen in place the entire time. He looked from the statement in my hand to my phone, and for the first time, the eyes that had held only hatred were filled with confusion and doubt. As they were thrown out onto the street like trash, the thread that had held my parents together for 16 years finally snapped. Jim, are you even human? My mom lunged at him like a wild animal, scratching and clawing. You spineless coward, it's all your fault. If you and that bitch hadn't ganged up on me and stolen the baby, would things have ended up like this? My fault. My dad finally exploded, shoving her away, his eyes bloodshot. If it weren't for me, the baby would be dead. It was you. You're the one who brought that hammer down and destroyed this whole family. Who are you trying to blame? I destroyed the family? If I wasn't trying to give you an heir, would I have been praying to every god I could find? My son was born to be a genius. It was you and that little bitch, who turned my brilliant son into a walking curse. They tore into each other on the busy city street, like two rabid dogs under the scornful gaze of countless passers-by, turning 16 years of resentment, poverty, and the bitterness of their failed lives into the most poisonous words they could hurl at each other. And Leo just stood there beside them, the foundation of his 16-year existence. The story of the evil sister had been pulverized in the last 10 minutes. It turned out he wasn't some genius ruined by his sister. He had always been nothing more than a failed investment, a defective product in his mother's eyes, and a burden his father was always ready to cast off. All the bullying, ridicule, and pain he had endured, the fortress of hatred he had built in his heart, it was all a joke from the very beginning. They eventually found the cheapest motel they could, hidden deep in a labyrinthine urban village. The room smelled of damp and mildew, the walls covered in stains. The furious arguments had ceased, replaced by a silence that was even more suffocating. My parents took opposite corners of the bed, watching each other warily like two venomous snakes, each afraid the other would strike. But they were more afraid of Leo. The boy who had looked so lost on the street was now sitting silently in the room's only chair. His slightly crooked face was blank, but his eyes were like a bottomless, frozen pond, watching them without moving. Being stared at like that, my parents were on edge, finding it hard to even breathe. The weapon they had raised, having lost its target, now seemed to be slowly turning its barrel toward them. Bang! 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 The motel's thin wooden door shuddered violently. The next second, the lock was kicked in, and several burly men with tattoos squeezed into the tiny room. The bald man in the lead spotted Leo cowering on the bed and grinned. Well, you little rat. You run fast. The 50 grand you owe is now 60 with interest. Pay up, or we take a leg. My parents were terrified. They frantically waved their hands. Mister, it has nothing to do with us. He's the one who borrowed the money. The bald man sneered and slapped my dad across the face, making him see stars. Cut the crap. He's your son. The son pays the father's debts. That's how it works. Two men moved in, grabbed Leo by the hair, and yanked him to the floor. My mom screamed hysterically at the sight of the violence. She looked at her son being dragged away, then at her own empty pockets. The instinct for self-preservation took over. In a moment of pure terror, she made a decision. She pointed at Leo struggling on the floor and yelled at the men, "Don't hurt us. He's the one who spent all the money. This useless thing has been dragging us down our whole lives." As if that wasn't enough, she added a line that would push Leo into the abyss for good. "We don't want him. You can take him. He's still got 2 kidneys, they should be worth something." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap, stunning everyone in the room. Even the menacing debt collector stared at the woman in disbelief. Leo, pinned to the floor by his hair, stopped struggling. He slowly lifted his head and looked at his own mother. The dazed, confused expression on his face vanished. In its place was an icy calm. His gaze moved slowly from his mother's face to the nightstand. On it sat a heavy crystal glass ashtray. "You little..." The man holding his hair had just started to curse when Leo moved. With all his strength, he smashed the ashtray against the man's temple. Crack. A sickening thud, a pained grunt, and blood gushed out. The hand gripping Leo's hair let go. He didn't look at the injured man, didn't even glance at his mother cowering in a ball. He scrambled to his feet, still holding the bloody ashtray, and went straight for his father, who was slumped in the corner of the bed. For the first time, my dad's face showed pure, unadulterated terror. They're insane. This whole damn family is insane. The remaining debt collectors finally snapped out of it. They were here for money, not to get killed. Seeing things spiral out of control, the bald man cursed and was the first to bolt from the room. The others scattered like birds, running for their lives. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing off the outside world. Only the 3 of them were left in the tiny motel room. My mom, watching her son advance, finally broke. She fell to her knees, crying and begging. "Leo, it's me, Mom. You're my son. I was just talking nonsense. Please spare your mother." Leo ignored her. He just walked silently, step by step, toward the cowardly, hypocritical man who had used him as a shield his entire life. Then he raised the ashtray. A week later, I received a call from the police department in my hometown. The voice on the other end was a formal, emotionless male voice. Is this Ms. Page? Regarding the case of Jim and Laura, we need you to come back to handle their affairs. Your brother, Leo, is currently in criminal custody on suspicion of intentional homicide. I listened calmly and said, okay, I understand. I took 3 days off work and returned to the small town I had fled 16 years ago. There were no tears, no grief, not even the satisfaction of vengeance. My heart was a vast, empty calm I had never known before. I signed various documents and, as the next of kin, dealt with my parents' remains. Finally, I went back to the old, dilapidated house. It was covered in dust, the air thick with the smell of poverty and despair. I went into my parents' room, opened the drawer of the nightstand, and in the very back, I saw the familiar, rusted toolbox. I opened it. The claw hammer was lying there silently. This was it. The tool that had started the tragedy of 2 generations of my family, the source of all the evil. I closed the toolbox, carried it out of the house, and sealed the front door. Outside the town there was a moat, its water murky and slow-moving. I walked to the stone bridge in the middle of the river, opened the toolbox, and took out the hammer. It felt heavy in my hand. I looked at it, and I saw the first, absurd half of my life. Then I raised my arm and, with all my strength, threw it as far as I could into the river. Splash! The hammer hit the water, sending out a circle of muddy ripples, and then quickly vanished, sinking to the dark riverbed, gone forever. The ripples on the surface spread out and finally, the water grew still again. Everything was over. I turned around and, facing the light of the setting sun, began walking toward the train station. Behind me was a hometown I could never return to and a past that was already buried. Ahead of me was my own life, free from all restraints.